Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Strazicich, and today we'll be continuing on in our study here in Romans chapter 9, and basically for this particular unit here, we'll be wrapping it up here, and we'll be focusing on verses 24 to 29. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up there. Okay, then coming then to this slide, we will offer up a translation of the text, and then we'll look at a little structure, and beginning in verse 24. Us also whom he called, not only of the Jews, but also from the Gentiles, as he also says in Hosea, I shall call him who was not my people, and she that was not loved, beloved. And it will be in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they shall be called sons of the living God. Now Isaiah cried out concerning Israel, if the number of the sons of Israel is as the sand of the sea, the remnant shall be saved. For the Lord, by bringing to a finish and cutting short, shall execute his word upon the land. And also Isaiah foretold, unless the Lord of hosts had left to us a seed, we would have become as Sodom, and we would have been made like unto Gomorrah. Okay, so in this unit here, as the point C here is entitled, The Calling of the Gentiles Together with Israel as the people of God. So it was important for Paul in this discussion defining who the elect are of the people of God, that he inserts here the Gentiles. So somehow, he's writing, primarily to the Gentile church. The majority of that church is Gentile. And so he's writing to them, and they're basically, starting to get the picture. Well, how do we fit in, into this picture? How did we become part of Israel? And so Paul's explaining this here, and he finishes up the topic in chapter 11. When he starts talking about being grafted into the rich olive root of Israel. And so that whole discussion comes to a close. And that's where you got to remember, 9 to 11 is a unit, these chapters. And a lot of, the final words of Paul on these matters, he brings to a close in chapter 11. So you got to remember, you got to read, you got to just keep reading, and then read it back, and then issues in 9 to 11 become clear. And so what Paul's doing here, he's number one, this relative clause whos here, it takes us back to the previous unit, and it's referring to vessels of mercy in the previous verse that Paul was talking about. And so this is a relative clause that structurally, diagrammatically is related to verses 22 to 23. So it is definitely, a part of that, but it becomes it's a hinge. This relative clause becomes a hinge by which now he includes the Gentiles here in with the people of God. And so that's the function of verse 24. And he's using here, remember this term here, kalεω here in the aorist form, ekalesin here, that God called us not only from the Jews but also from the Gentiles. And then he's going in to offer up scriptural support to undergird, his assertion here, that now, the Gentile church is to be included. And he ingeniously does this by going to Hosea. And it typically here, and this is point 2, he starts here with, primarily we would understand verses 25 and 26 to refer to the Gentiles, the calling of the Gentiles. Okay, now technically, they're both covering, especially the really only Hosea here, the Hosea passage. This is what's defining the calling of the Gentiles, and then when he comes to the Isaiah portion, you can see that Paul primarily in his mind has the Jewish remnant in view here. Okay, but truly, whether we're Gentiles or we're Jews, we're all a remnant. So the same principle that works for Israel, that a remnant is saved, well, only a remnant of the Gentiles are going to be saved as well. So that's why some scholars will view, verse 25 and 26 as relating to the us here. Okay, us. That includes Paul and the Gentiles here. So that when you go to Hosea, it's not just for the Gentiles, but it's also for the Jewish remnant. So that's important to see. I don't want you to. You're going to see some scholars that are going to say, well, verse 25 and 26 is not just for the Gentiles. It's also to be included with the Jews, and technically speaking, they're right. But when you kind of stand back and look at this from a different, after reading 27 to 29, then you can kind of see that primarily, verses 25 and 26, are going to be about the topic of the Gentiles calling. And then talking about the Jewish remnant here, point 3, in verses 27 to 29. And so this is how it flows. And then he's using, remember, this is using this principle of the Gezerah Shaveh here, using the verb kalεω, and we saw that back in verse 7. We saw it in verse 12. And we saw it here, back here at verse 24. Okay, and right here, us also, whom he has called, not only of the Jews but also of the Gentiles. And then he's going to use it here, right here. We get the future passive use of the verb here. Klethe santai here, there they shall be called sons of the living God. Okay, so this is this Gezerah Shaveh taking this idea of this particular word, kalεω, and then joining other verses where you're going to see this word called, and it's helping Paul form his doctrinal teaching here that he's promoting here, of the calling of, here it's of the true spiritual Israel, and how he includes both Jews and Gentiles in that calling. Okay, and we're going to see other words here. We're going to see the word seed and the word sons, and these were all programmatic words that he used as Gezerah, Shaveh, and kind of lined them up, and then he's been repeating them, and it's all bringing it to a close here. But he needs to get to the Gentiles here to include them in the people of God, and he does so, and then we will see how he does this through the prophecies of the prophet Hosea. Okay, then coming here then to this particular slide, we will look at the text here diagrammatically, and then we will show its relationship to what went before. So we have here this. This is a relative clause here, and we have whose, which is our word that takes us back up here. This is going to refer over here to vessels of mercy. So that's how this is related here, and so it is a subordinate clause. So this who's here, right here, which is down here in diagrammatically, how this verse here 24 then is diagrammatically then written is seen in this graph here, and it also goes into verse 25a, which gives the citation formula, as he also says in Hosea, and then it will then go in here then to direct speech here, but this functions here, this comparative clause here, then it functions here to introduce quoted speech from a biblical text. But so we have here, coming back up here to verse 24, and it would begin, we could say, even us whom he called. All right, and then not only of the Jews, but also of the Gentiles. So he bifurcates the idea of how the people of God is who they are comprised of, and that it's comprised of God calling both Jews and Gentiles, and then through this comparative clause, as he says in Hosea, as he also says in Hosea, and then we have to go on from there, and it will then go on into the quoted passage of Hosea. But it's just important for us to look at this and to see how this verse 24 is a hinge, and it's grammatically subordinate here to skue eleus here, vessels of mercy, and so this hus here, forming the relative clause that we're looking at here in verse 24, in apposition is hamos here. Paul includes himself along with the Gentiles. So this is where Paul is going with verse 24, and that we are part of these vessels of mercy, okay, that we talked about last time. And just so that you don't forget the context, it'll only take a second to read this. Therefore shall you say to me, why then does he still find fault? For who has resisted his counsel, his boulemati? O man, on the contrary, who are you who answers back to God? That which is formed shall not say to the one who forms, why have you made me in this way, does he? Or does not the potter have authority over the clay to make from the same lump one a vessel of honor and another for dishonor? But if God, by desiring to demonstrate wrath and to make his power known, bore in much patience vessels of wrath which have been refurbished for destruction, and in order that he might make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory. Then it goes, us also whom he called, not only of the Jews, but also of the Gentiles. So this is how it's formed, but you can see that verse 24 is intricately, connected to what it was spoken before, but then it creates a caveat by which for Paul then to make this new subject here about the calling of the Gentiles. Okay, then coming then here to this slide here, we're going to look at the scriptural citations here that Paul is calling upon here. And we're looking here at, remember, Romans 9, 24 and 25. Us also whom he called not only of the Jews, but also of the Gentiles, as he says in Hosea, or as he also says in Hosea. And then he quotes from Hosea here, and he starts off here with kalẹω here, which Paul, intentionally changes here from, in the text here we have amarti, and which would not be, it's not the same verb here as kalẹω. So Paul's he's bringing it into conformity with his Gezerah Shaveh term of kalẹω here. So this is all just building upon Paul's Gezerah Shaveh and how he's using this term calling here repeatedly to make his theological point. And so in 25 here he says, and I shall call him that is not my people, and she that is not beloved, and this responds here to actually to verse 25, but to get the sense here of how Hosea turns chapter 1 around into a salvific message here. In verse 23 he says, and it shall come about in that day, I shall answer, declares the Lord, and I shall answer the heavens, and they shall answer the earth, and the earth shall answer the grain and the new wine and oil, and they shall answer Jezreel. And I shall sow her to myself in the land, and I shall have compassion upon Lo Ruchama, and I shall say to Lo Ami, Ami Ata, you are my people, and then it ends here with Vehu Yomar Elohai, and he shall say, my God, or to bring it to completion, you are my God. So that fulfills the covenant formulary there and restores the So this is the restoration of the covenant and the eschatological salvation of Israel. So what we're looking at here is, remember, Paul's talking about including the Gentiles in with the with Israel as the people of God, and he's calling upon this text here in Hosea to make that point, to give a fuller account of what all is going on here. Remember that Hosea was told to marry Gomer, daughter, Bat Divlayim, the daughter of two cakes, and that he was told to then marry her and have children of harlotry by this harlot Gomer. And so he does, and so he has these three children. He first sires Jezreel, and then God said, call his name Jezreel, for I will bring the kingdom of Israel to an end in the valley of Jezreel. And then she has this daughter, and God tells Hosea, call her name Lo Ruchama, and then, because that means I do, because he says, for I will not have compassion upon the house of Israel any longer. And then she sires a second son, and God said, call his name Lo Ami, which means not my people. And so this is the background here, starting in verse 6, and it just says, and she conceived again and bore a daughter, and he said to him, call her name Lo Ruchama, for I shall no longer have compassion upon the house of Israel, for I shall by no means forgive them. And the house of Judah I shall have, but on the house of Judah I shall have compassion on them, and I will save them by Yahweh their God, and I will not save them by bow and by sword and by war, by horses and horsemen. And she weaned Lo Ruchama, and she conceived and bore a son, and he said, call his name Lo Ami, for you are not my people, ki atem lo ami, ve'anochi lo ehye lachem. And so this basically says, for you are not my people, and I am not your I am to you. So this is all going back to Exodus chapter 3, all about the divine name Yahweh. But it's originally here, I shall be who I shall be, and tell them I shall be has sent me to you. So Ehyeh, I shall be, becomes formalized in a noun form that scholars would refer to as Yahweh here, or you'll say Yahweh, and then and so there's other ways to pronounce this name, but I don't need to get into all that now. But just the scholarly world refers it to Yahweh. Okay. So just that's a little background here to put a little, flesh on Hosea here, on this passage that he is recalling. But note here in verse 20, down here in verse 25, and I will sow her to myself in the land, and then it says this, and I shall have compassion upon Lo Ruchama, and I will say to Lo Ami, Ami Ata. So when Paul picks this up, he's reversing, because here in verse 25 in Hosea 2:25, he refers to Lo Ruchama first, And then lastly, he speaks to lo ami. But here in our passage, he reverses this. He puts the last clause first here and then Paul creates his own, distic here, and I shall call lo ami my people, and lo ruchama and beloved here for agape menain here, agape menain. So this is what Paul's doing. He's reversing the order, and I would, it's because he's trying to get to the term "my people." Okay, and that's the key. That's the reason why he would manipulate the passage here and reverse the clauses, is because the all important term here is calling lo ami, he that is not my people, my people. And then what he actually does change here is for lo ruchama here, he's, typically this would be from elao here, from to have compassion. But Paul changes it here to agapao, and that's most likely done because of verse 13. Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. So he wants to pick up on the love and hate term, and so he's going to pick up and use agapao here. And I think that's the reason why Paul did this, because when Peter quotes this, he uses elao, the verb form, to have compassion, or have mercy, here, by the translation here of lo ruchama here, and here in the first part of verse 25 here of chapter 2 of Hosea. So this is why he reverses this. It's to get to the key phrase, my people, and that's why he's calling, Paul's saying us also whom he called, not only of the Jews but also of the Gentiles. So the Gentiles are now being referred to as my people, as the people of God. And so what happened was that up here where we looked before, Hosea is this prophet who's showing that they've broken the covenant, and so God's formally going to end the covenant with the northern 10 tribes. You can see here from verse 7 that he's keeping the covenant with Judah for a little bit longer, and at least until 589, 587, when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and took them captive to Babylon. So here, in the event here of, either, from the Syro-Ephraimite War, all the way until 722, when the nation of the northern nation of Israel were then, carted off into captivity, and so that was done by Sargon II, and maybe mopped up by Shalmaneser V or something like that. So you can read all about that in the Book of Kings and Chronicles. That's all mentioned there. But it's also mentioned here in Hosea here, and this is what Hosea is referring to. This, because he's living at the same time as Isaiah. Okay. And so this is, so the very term "my people" here, because he calls them lo ami, not my people. So we saw here that, and God said, to him, call his name lo ami. And then the basis for that is, you are not my people, and I am not your ehiyeh. So this is, I am not your God, Yahweh, any longer. The covenant is broke. So the whole phrase, and you shall be my people and I shall be your God, that's the covenant formulary based upon the marriage ceremony, where it would be said, you are my wife and I am your husband. It would be said something like that. And so it's based off the marriage formula, the covenant formula. And so this is how all this stuff, came about in the course of the culture of the Old Testament, and how what these words, how they were originally understood, and in the context of marriage. And so the covenant is understood as a marriage, and so you just got to know a little bit of Old Testament to understand that this phraseology is all very covenantal, and then that that he was told to marry a harlot here and have children of harlot. So it was that Gomer broke the covenant with Hosea here, and that there were, and that she's typified as a harlot, playing the harlot on Hosea, and that's to typify that between the relationship between Israel and God, that there has been, Israel has gone off and played the harlot on God with different idols. So that's what this whole thing's about here. And so you're to understand that here, all of this is embedded here. Paul's intimately, acquainted with this, and so would, anyone, Jew or Gentile who spent time in the synagogue, sat in teaching in the synagogue. They would have known this from reading of the Septuagint. So that's all, and Paul would have not only read this in the Septuagint, he would have known this from the Hebrew Bible as well, being schooled by Gamaliel. And so for this first part here of the quotation, it's coming out of Hosea, chapter 2 at the end, here in verses 23 to 25. And then he goes on to state, and it will, he's quoting Hosea 2:1 here, which begins to state this, and it will, and the number of the sons of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered or measured nor numbered, and it will be in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. Then it says, to them they shall be, you're to supply the verb, and to them they shall be called the sons of the living God. And then it goes on then here to a messianic reference, and the sons of Israel will gather themselves, the sons of Judah will gather themselves, and the sons of Israel together, and they will place over them one head, and they'll go up from the land, for great is the day of Jezreel. And you can see here that Jezreel here and here, down here in verse 24 of chapter 2, Jezreel, this is, remember, all this is intertextually bringing up, this is the name of the firstborn son, Jezreel, because, that was where God broke the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel, and so now they're regaining their unity and their victory in the great is the day of Jezreel here back here in chapter 1 in verses 1 and 2 here of Hosea. So all these names are being, there's a reversal of fortunes for the names of the two sons and daughters, and that's all being reflected here in the salvation messages here. So that's that's what's going on here, and the Septuagint here picks up on this, and they shall be called sons of the living God, but they at first they were called a no people, and that's you got to understand that it means you're to translate this and call his name Lo Ami, which means not a people. So if they're not a people, and they're no longer not my people, that means they're outside of the covenant, okay? And so just like Israel, if Israel they were originally the people of God, and through breaking of the covenant, they became the people, not the people of God. And then by God's graciousness, he brought them back into covenant relationship, and then changed their name to Ami, my people. Well, then just like God can, kick Israel out of the covenant relationship with him, and now Israel is just like any other nation, well then, just as God is free to remove Israel from being his people, God's free then to include those who are not his people as the people of God. So that's why he's calling upon Hosea, is just showing that how God can, if God's going to call his people no longer his people because they broke the covenant, well then, and if God then can take them, after the covenant has been broken, and then now re-engraft them in again as the people of God, well, then God can take the Gentiles and include them in as his people. And you're going to see how Paul then ingeniously then he's going to take this topic up again in chapter 11 underneath the rich root of the olive tree that Israel is a part of, and that unbelieving Israel then is chopped off, and then that the Gentiles are grafted in, and then God says, don't boast, because because you stand by faith, and don't boast over the branches that were broken off, because if God broke them off, hey, he can break you off as well. So obviously there's no once saved always saved garbage. Paul just destroyed that argument here in chapter 11, and then God said that hey, if unbelieving Israel wants to believe, I can, God's able to graft them in again. So God can, break off branches and, regraft broken branches back in. And so, this is Paul's theology. And I take that very seriously, and so should you. You got to remember, Paul's a Jew here. He's not a part of some reformation. He's a part of the biblical fulfillment of the new covenant. He's an apostle of the New Testament. I don't really, as far as all this Reformation theology, it's called biblical theology, exegesis, and hermeneutics. It's not Reformation theology. God forbid. Okay, then coming here to our next slide here, we're going to then finish up this unit here. And this is point 3, the calling of the Jewish remnant to salvation with scriptural support. So this is talking about the Israel within the Israel here. And so we just saw that how God included the Gentiles, in with the people of God, in with the Jews as the people of God. And he did that by the same logic whereby Hosea, nullified the covenant, and then it was said to them, "You're no longer my people." And then in the salvation report of Hosea, then he said that, salvivically, that there would be a day when God reverses that, and it said, and wherein it was said to them, "You are not my people," there they will be called the sons of the living God. So if God can then call Israel not his people, and then reverse that and call them his people again, well, then God can then, by the same logic, take the nations who are not his people and then call them as his people. So that's the logic here that Paul is operating on. He doesn't tell you that. You just have to figure that out by reading the text, in which it's not that hard to figure out where he's going with it. So, but anyhow, that's the logic of of how the Gentiles here are included in with the people of God, and that also that whole thing may go back to Deuteronomy 32, like 21 or 22, where God will provoke his people by a no people to jealousy. And then Paul takes up that whole thought for down here at the end of chapter 10 going into 11. So even Hosea here probably, this whole term here, no people, is probably an intertextual echo back to the ha'azinu there in Deuteronomy 32. And that would be, I think, verse 21. Okay, but anyhow, so let's look here at our text. But Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, if the number of the sons of Israel is as the sand of the sea, the remnant shall be saved. For the Lord, by bringing to completion and cutting short, shall execute his word upon the earth. And just as Isaiah foretold, unless the Lord of hosts had left for us a seed, we would have become as Sodom, and we would have been made like unto Gomorrah. So that's our text here, and then I broke it down here into, there's the first citation and the second citation, because each citation comes with its own citation report formula, and we can see that here in 27a here in the phrase, but Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, and then what comes next then is the quoted speech here from the citation that he takes out of the book of Isaiah. And likewise here in 29 there's another citation report formula, and just as Isaiah foretold, and then that functions then to introduce the scriptural citation here. So that's why we broke it down into two, and to isolate those thoughts. And so up here, what Paul's doing here in the first citation here is that it's basically, what he's doing, he's condensing the thoughts of 22 and 23 into his own reformulated, his own interpretation of that, but using the words of that text so that he's referring to it. And so let's look at the Hebrew text as it stands now. And it'll say here, though your people be, that is Israel, as the sand of the sea, a remnant within it shall return. A complete destruction is determined over, and one that is overflowing in righteousness, for there is an end and one that is determined. The Lord Yahweh of hosts is the one who executes, we'll say this, in the midst of all the earth. So what Paul does here is, at the beginning of 23a here, he's going to condense this here, and he creates some of these adverbial participles out of this, and this is kind of what he's doing. He's just kind of condensing verses 22 and 23 into his thought. So he says here, and if the number of the sons of Israel is the sand of the sea, the remnant shall return. So the remnant shall return is following the Septuagint here. The Septuagint here, their remnant shall be saved. But in the actual Hebrew text, it's She'ar Yashuv Bo. This is actually the name of Isaiah's son here. She'ar Yashuv, a remnant shall return. But the Septuagint translates this as the remnant shall be saved. But in context here, the remnant shall be, it's the remnant shall return. And obviously they are the ones who are saved. So the Septuagint here just gave Paul an easier way of just going with the idea of the text that the remnant, of course, they are the ones who are saved. Anyhow, so and then some of the difficult phraseology here. An annihilation is determined, overflowing with righteousness, for there is an end and one that is determined. And then you can see here the Lord Yahweh of hosts, Paul shortens it just to the Lord, okay? So he eliminates basically the Lord of hosts, we'll just say that. And then he just has the Lord Kurios here shall execute, and we'll say his word. And so this is all just Paul's just shortening up and making sense out of this difficult verse, and he's by and large here. He's taking just parts of the Septuagint reading here, and he's taking this part, he's eliminating in righteousness, he's taking that away, and then he's taking down here it has God, and he's replaced it with Lord, so he's taking Yahweh here. He keeps poiese here, that remains the same here as in the Septuagint, and he eliminates here this substantival use of the participle here of cutting short. He excludes the second mention of the participle, but that one's substantival that he cuts out. And he keeps here, the Septuagint here has logon, and he keeps that. So you can see how Paul reformulates it. And so basically what he's saying is that even though the number of the sons of Israel are vast and many, there's only going to be a few of them that are saved. That's the remnant theology that Paul picked up on in 1:6. It's not as though the word of God has failed, for not all Israel are Israel. So Paul's been explaining that, and so now he comes here. It would have been nice if he would have quoted this. It took him all the way to verse 27 to spit it all out. So you got to just keep reading. If you don't understand the text, just keep reading, and eventually it's going to, his thought's going to come to an end, and it will all make sense. So it's this whole remnant theology that was basically the calling of Isaiah. And so this is just a composite quotation from these two verses. It's kind of like a midrashic complex. And then he says again here, and just as Isaiah foretold, unless the Lord of hosts had left to a seed. Okay, so he's following the Septuagint here, okay? Because we'll see here that in the Hebrew term, it doesn't have seed, it has remnant here. Unless Yahweh of hosts had left to us a small remnant, we would be like Sodom, and we would have been made like unto Gomorrah. So this is, so what Paul has here is that he uses the Septuagint sperma, which is also Paul's other Gezerah Shaveh term that we saw there in verse 8, that in Isaac your seed shall be called. So the seed here, so this is this whole theology that he's done, he's used Gezerah Shaveh here to make his theological point here concerning not all Israel is Israel, and then he's using the word kalεω here that we saw here in the previous verse, and then he's also utilizing the term seed. So this is what Paul's doing, and we can obviously see here that verse 9 here is, that we're talking here, unless Yahweh of hosts has left to us as a small remnant, we would be like Sodom, and we would have been made like unto Gomorrah. Well, that's really grim, and we'll see a little bit more about this in the next slide. Okay, so then, what's happening here is that when you do read Isaiah chapter 1, this it is laid out as a prophetic covenant lawsuit. That's what scholars have referred to it as. And there's a couple seminal articles written by Wright, The Lawsuit of God, a form critical study of Deuteronomy 32, and we have Muffin here, the covenant lawsuit and the prophets. We have Limburg here, the root reeve, and the prophetic lawsuit speeches. So these are some very good seminal articles that scholars would refer back to this reeve covenant lawsuit. And it would call, a summoning of the elements of heaven and earth. And, that's how Isaiah starts out, give ear, O heaven, and give ear, O earth, and then there's the basic statement of case, he basically, I gave birth to these sons, the sons of Israel, and they've rebelled against me. So there's this basic statement of the lawsuit against them, and then there's a list of accusations, and you'll see all that listed there in verses 4 following down all the way down, and so there's typically a rejection of sorts to the recourse of sacrifice, and then there's a verdict of judgment or a call to change conduct. And you can see all these elements, how they work themselves out there in Isaiah 1. And this is where Paul quotes out of here in verse 9, that unless Yahweh had left us a small remnant, we would have become like Sodom and been made like unto Gomorrah. So this is forming the back of Paul's remnant theology, that only a remnant shall return, and the rest is history. Okay, this has been another session of biblical theology, exegesis, and hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. Please like, share, and subscribe, and make comments. And we'll see you back here next time.